There's a lot of people out there that are very, very lonely. As a matter of fact, there's a loneliness epidemic in this country because there's a lot of people that simply don't have any friends. And the common theme is that these people are often looked down upon. If you don't have friends, there must be something wrong with you. But is that true? Or is the fact that you don't have any friends and that you're lonely or alone, is that a good thing? Does it mean that you actually have a superpower? And I think a lot of this comes down to perspective. It's really all about how you deal with these things, because if you don't have friends and you feel like you're very alone and lonely and that makes you suffer, then there might be something to that. There might be a reason why you're suffering. There might be an underlying thing in your life, in your mind, that makes you believe that if you don't have friends and you're lonely, then there is a problem with you and you're unfulfilled and you're unhappy. But I don't think that necessarily has to be the case, because from what I've seen, some of the people that don't have friends and that are very, very lonely are actually maybe some of the best off. And that's not to say that it's a bad thing to have friends, because I have quite a few friends. I've got people in my life that I've known my entire life that I value very, very dearly. And I think that's very important. But for the people that don't, and that kind of beat themselves up over it, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. And I'm going to give you a different perspective on this that might make you realize being alone, not having friends, and most importantly, being comfortable alone might actually be a very good thing. And it might mean that you have a superpower that many of us should probably strive to get, but that many of us don't have, because many of us are very codependent. We need people around us at all times to feel happy, to feel fulfilled. Otherwise, we feel like outcasts. Now, for me personally, I've always been a lone wolf. I am completely content and comfortable by myself, 100% alone. And that's not to say I don't want people in my life and that I don't mind having people in my life, because I do love that as well. But the good thing is that I can walk on both sides. I don't need one or the other to feel complete. And I think that's a very, very important thing, because at some point in our lives, pretty much all of us are going to wind up alone at some point. Maybe not forever. It might be short durations. But how we handle that loneliness, how we deal with it, and where our mind goes when we are completely alone, it matters. It matters a lot. So let me tell you a story. All right, there's a story I just heard, and it's about a man in an apple tree. Sounds kind of corny, I know. I thought the same thing, but bear with me for a second, because this is going to make a lot of sense. All right, so there was this little boy, and during his childhood, he never had any friends. And he was walking through the woods, and he found an apple tree. So he started talking to the apple tree, and he asked the apple tree, "Would you like to be my friend?" The apple tree was very happy about this, because obviously he's in the forest. Not many people stop by to talk to him and make friends with him, so he agreed. And they became very good friends. And the boy would come visit the apple tree every single day. And their friendship blossomed into this great, amazing thing. And the boy would often share with the apple tree that one day when he grew up, he wanted to be a king. And he wanted to be able to provide for his kingdom. But as more time passed and the boy grew up, he didn't visit the apple tree as often. Years and years went by, and then he finally stopped by. And the apple tree, being the awesome friend that he was, he asked the boy how he had been, if he had become king. But the boy, instead of being happy and telling a great story about his life, he just complained and talked about how he was so unhappy and he couldn't become king because he doesn't have any money, he can't buy food, and he can't provide for his kingdom. So the apple tree, again, being the awesome friend that he was, he said, "I have all these apples. Take these apples, use them to provide for your kingdom, sell them, and you will have money and you can become king." So the boy did. He loaded as many apples as he could possibly carry. He took them back to his kingdom, and he disappeared for many, many years. The apple tree was lonely in the forest, wondering where the boy had went, wondering if the boy ever became king. And then one day the boy stopped by, and the apple tree, being the awesome friend that he was, asked him how his life had been. "Are you now king?" But the boy, instead of being happy about seeing his friend again, he just complained. He talked about how he was so unhappy, and how he wasn't king, and how he couldn't get a family because he didn't have a house. And the apple tree, again being the awesome friend that he was, said, I have all these branches, cut these branches off, take them back to your village and make yourself a house so that you can have a family. So the boy did. He cut all the branches off, took them back, and disappeared. Years and years go by. The apple tree is all alone, wondering where the boy went, if he got his family, if he is now happy. Then one day the boy shows up years later, and the apple tree, again being the awesome friend that he is, asks the boy, how's your life? Do you have your family? Are you now happy? He said, I have a family, I have a wife, I have kids, but I am so unhappy. I am so unfulfilled, and I just want to escape. I need a boat, but I don't have a boat, so I can't escape. But this time the apple tree didn't respond because he was afraid of what the man was going to take next if he offered more of himself to the man. And sure enough, the man pulls out an axe, he cuts the apple tree down, and he makes a boat out of the apple tree's trunk. And then the man sails away, never to be seen again. And the apple tree is completely defeated. The only thing left is a stump. And every once in a while a squirrel would crawl up on the stump or a bird would land on it. But that's the only company that the stump ever got. But over the years, eventually that stump sprouted a little sprout. And that sprout grew into a massive, triumphant apple tree. And after many years of that apple tree being alone, along came a little boy. And the little boy told the apple tree, I have no friends. Would you like to be my friend? But the apple tree trembled and was absolutely terrified, and it did not respond. And in that very moment, that apple tree decided that it would never be friends with anyone ever again. And the apple tree lived out the rest of its days completely alone, but completely content, completely happy. Because yes, the apple tree doesn't have any friends, but what it does have is many reasons not to trust anyone. And that's what we should think about with people that don't have friends, because maybe they have reasons for not having friends. Maybe they've been used as an emotional tampon their entire lives, or they have reasons not to trust people. And people that don't have friends, people that are alone, they shouldn't be looked down upon for that. They shouldn't be mocked or berated because of that. They've made a choice that is true to them, and if they're happy being alone and they're content with that, there's nothing wrong with that. And I would argue that being alone is an absolute superpower. And not just being alone, but being comfortable alone, because there is a difference. If you're alone and lonely, then there might be a problem there. And you might need to ask yourself why you're not comfortable with yourself. Why do you feel like you have to have somebody around you at all times? And a prime example of this is if you've ever watched that show Alone. The first time I watched this show was just recently, actually. I was hanging out with the family for Father's Day. Everybody was sitting around watching Alone. And one of the things that I noticed right away, that I picked up on, is that there were a lot of people that were going home, not because they couldn't survive in the wild, not because they couldn't find food or shelter, or that they were bad survivalists, but it was simply for the fact that they were not comfortable being alone. There were grown men that were amazing survivalists that were breaking down into tears every single day because they were not comfortable being alone. The thoughts that creep up when you are 100% alone by yourself can be absolutely terrifying. And that's what these people were experiencing. So if you're uncomfortable with your own thoughts when you are alone, there's a problem there. And that's something that you might need to address. Because if you continue to run away from those thoughts like the people in the show did, then you're never going to fix that. You're never going to be complete, and you're never going to be fulfilled. Your happiness and your fulfillment is always going to rely on somebody else. And that's a terrible thing, because what happens when there isn't somebody else? What happens when you are completely alone and you're forced into that position and you can't run away and you don't have somebody there to lean on? What happens then? Then you're helpless, you're powerless, you're miserable. Your life is now going to descend into absolute chaos, and you're going to be completely full of despair. And that's not a situation that we should put ourselves in. So as you can see, the people that are comfortable being alone, not lonely, not unhappy because you're alone, but comfortable being alone by yourself, fulfilled by yourself, that's a superpower. And that's a superpower that not many of us have. But I feel like it's one that's very, very important, because when you're not relying on external factors, you don't need that to be happy and fulfilled. You can be happy and fulfilled no matter what the circumstances are. And that's very important, because circumstances change. Life is very uncertain. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. We never know what's going to happen. Things can change in an instant. We might be completely happy with our family, with our friends, and then all that can be turned upside down. Anything can happen. But if your entire life and your happiness is dictated by people around you, by your surroundings, and not by yourself, you're going to be in a very vulnerable position. That's going to put you in a very bad spot. And there's a lot of people that could take advantage of that. Because if you need somebody to rely on, you might bring people into your life just for the sake of having someone in your life, even though they may not align with you, even though they might be toxic. You might be like that apple tree that allows people to come into your life and take and take and take from you until there is nothing left. And then you have no choice but to spend the rest of your life alone because you no longer trust people. So I think it's important to get in front of this before it gets that far, because I think a lot of people can fall into that trap. I think we do it daily. I think we see it daily, all around us. And I think that's one big reason why there's a loneliness epidemic. Number one, people are much harder to relate to these days. It's harder to align with people because people are so stuck in their phones and social media. And I think we're losing that ability to properly communicate with one another. So that's a very big problem. But number two, there's also a lot of people that have simply lost trust. So if you ever find yourself in a position where you're uncomfortable being alone, and you can't sit in silence for fear of what's going to surface when you're alone with your thoughts, then you might want to step back and ask yourself, is this healthy? Is the fact that I have to surround myself with people a good thing? Or should I dig down deep and look within, face my demons and learn how to overcome them so that I can potentially gain a new superpower? I think that's a question we all have to ask ourselves, and I think it's one that's very important, especially in the modern era, an era where people are more connected than ever, but are more unhappy and unfulfilled because they feel more alone.